Greetings from the evening, everyone. Today, I want to talk about the newest FNaF game, Secret of the Mimic, and how it compares to Security Breach, which was like the last mainline game, because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I want to talk about it. But first, some small disclaimers. I have not, nor do I plan to play either of these games because they're $40 each. The information I use here, as such, is based on watching playthroughs and speedrunning content online, and listening to the views of people online and some of my friends. So maybe take a bit of this with a hint of salt. Also, because I don't have it, the background footage will be a FNaF World fan game I've been playing recently, which will be linked in the description. Flashing lights warning there. Also, I am aware that Security Breach's creation was rushed and that Secret of the Mimics was, to my knowledge at least, not. This is definitely relevant to some of the points I will make, but I will not mention it again as I want to focus on how the games themselves compare regardless of that. Oh, and of course, spoiler warning for both of the games. Alright, these being said, let us begin. Even early on into Secret of the Mimic, you can notice a very big difference in Security Breach, mainly in the tone. That is, obviously, Secret of the Mimic is a lot darker and dingier from the outset, and just in general. In Security Breach, for most of the game at least, the tone and stylization of everything is very clean and bright, which results in it really just not being scary. In a lot of ways, it doesn't feel like it was really meant as a horror game, but more of like a lore-packed, family-friendly free roam game. Like, I've heard kids game thrown around sometimes, and to a degree I kind of agree with that. And in some ways, this is actually fine. It's just a different feel. But I would say, when it comes to FNaF, it doesn't fit. You know, FNaF is a horror series, and it kind of detracts from that vibe. There's a lot less tension, and it's just not scary, like I said before, and it doesn't feel really like FNaF. But Secret of the Mimic, there's definitely tension in Secret of the Mimic. Whether it's the dilapidated building, or the hundreds of suits for the Mimic to appear from at literally any time, being our main example, you know you're not safe almost ever. For the vast majority of the game, you're turning corners to meet eye to eye with some random, worn down suit staring at you, and you can't help but question if that suit is about to come to life and bash in your cranium. And in that way, Secret Mimic works really well with tension, because you're constantly questioning if you're safe or if you're about to be ambushed and attacked by the Mimic. And it's just, because of that, it's put together really well. And I want to highlight a specific section just because I love it and I don't want to go without mentioning it, is Basement 2. It's just dark, it's dingy, you don't know what's going on, it's like a puzzle, and it's just cool. You know that you're not safe, you don't know why you're not safe, but you're just being chased by the white tiger, and I love it. It's creepy, it's dangerous, it's just well done. And while we're talking about tone, I want to actually bring up Ruin for a second, because it's relevant to the point of tone, that it's kind of like an intermediary point between Security Breach and Secret of the Mimic. It's obviously not as dark as Secret of the Mimic, but it's definitely not as bright and soft as Security Breach was. So it's kind of like an example of how you can see this trend of the games getting darker, where Secret of the Mimic is like the evolution of as a full game of the difference between Security Breach and Ruin. That's not a main point of this video, but I wanted to bring it up because you know, it's interesting, and I think it's worth at least noticing and mentioning. But of course, a well put together ambience doesn't mean much if your threat is non-existent or just sucks. Luckily, though, there is some pretty good news in that department too. In Security Breach, a lot of the animatronics, mainly the rock stars, would depend on the objectively not scary and also pretty easy to read and observe from afar security bots. Um, Even if you were caught by a security bot, there were a lot of ways for the AI to just not really make it to you, especially because you could generally just outrun it. And that's meh. It's really meh. Like, it's readable, it's not scary, and a lot of the time you can just escape it, which I think also plays into like that kiddish thing that some people mention. But in Secret of the Mimic, free roam enemies work really well, in part because of the smaller areas. And it's actually pretty well done too. If you run and make noise, the mimic will come to inspect that noise, and if it sees you, you're just screwed. You are not going to outrun the mimic if it sees you, although you might be able to outsmart it by hiding around a corner. You can also, of course, throw the wind-up mice or hit buttons on the cutouts to make noise and draw it away. And some of this was present in Security Breach, but I think here it's executed a lot better because it's constantly relevant and more relevant. Like, because you're in the smaller areas and you're not going to be able to outrun the mimic, it's constantly on your tail, and you need to use your environment in order to not be punched. It's just good stealth gameplay. It's like a peak stealth gameplay right there. And you're not just gonna like run away from your enemy in a straight line. You really do have to hide. Later on, you actually get more obstacles, right? With like the cupcakes in the Chica section, which will alert Chica to you, or can just jump scare you if you're stalling too much. And I think that's a really good way to keep you on your toes and having to stealth around even if the mimic isn't right on you. You have to be incredibly careful about what you're doing, and you have to use your environment to your advantage, because if you make one wrong move, you can just die. But I do also want to talk about the other dangers of the game, mainly Big Top and the White Tiger. Because they're cool in their own respects, and they're very much worth talking about for something like how the AI works. Beginning with Big Top, who plays a larger role in the gameplay, overall, he obviously has a lot of similarities to DJMM. They both have some linear chases, but where DJMM was like mainly linear chases in Security Breach, Big Top also has the sections where like he's stomping through the ceiling and like trying to crush you, which is pretty cool, I gotta say. And it works well with his design, and it's just a great way to switch up a chase and make it more about dodging than running straight ahead, given that I'm pretty sure that's still a factor in his chase. Then there's also the spotlight section, where you have to like hide from the spotlight while there's these like little dummies that make noise if you walk near them. Pretty cool too, it's like a spin on the stealth sections that you're normally dealing with the mimic. And even though that's a pretty short section and it's only really there once, it's a great way to like mix things up from being really repetitive with the mimic and have like a different kind of threat, and it works well, pretty good. But personally, again, my favorite section, Basement 2 with the White Tiger, not only tonally my favorite, but I think the gameplay in there is also really, really cool, because you have these like sections in the room turning on and off, and you can't tell what's going on around you. The only thing you know is that you need to get away from this White Tiger, and that kind of pushes you into your objective. But with the actual like mechanics of the White Tiger, it's constantly around you, moving around, trying to get you to walk into it, while also forcing you to be aware of where you're allowed to walk in. Like, that's cool. And if you make a mistake, you get the stomping that goes faster, and then you get jump scared. Again, a nice breakup, kind of like a puzzly one, like I said before, from the main gameplay, and that works really well to kind of switch things up. But To me at least, and I think a lot of us can agree with this, the biggest issue with Security Breach, maybe other than the rampant bugs on release, was the characters, like the focus on the characters. Like, I'm not trying to say anything about the characters being bland or poorly designed. A lot of them actually have a ton of potential, but that's kind of the issue. With so many characters that have so much potential, the actually lore important villains aren't really built on that much to make them feel like the main villains. Vanny, right, is infamously barely present in Security Breach, showing up like 4 times for gameplay purposes. Same thing with like Afton. He only shows up like in the secret ending for a little bit, and then he's not relevant again. Then of course there's the Blob, which is in there for 1 room, and it's just meh, you know. Each of these characters has a ton of potential. Like, you could make several games for each of these characters, just based on how important they are to lore and how unique they can be in gameplay. In Security Breach itself, they could have switched things up really well from the like immediate threat of the Rockstars, with the looming threat of like Vanny like catching you, or like Afton or the Blob like infecting the pizzeria or something. But because they're not really focused on like that, gameplay wise, again specifically gameplay wise, they feel more like secondary threats to the Rockstar cast, because they are used in gameplay, but they're not used much. But Secret of the Mimic, as you probably understand where I'm going with this by now, and you probably picked this up on your own if you were thinking about it, doesn't have this issue. Secret of the Mimic is clear of that, because like 80% of the game is fully focused on the Mimic as a threat, whether that be through linear chases or through stealth sections. Even though it is changing costumes, of course, it is your enemy almost solely. And because of that, you really get to feel out how the Mimic operates, both literally like in gameplay and figuratively in like how it's represented as thinking. You see it try to trick you as it goes between suits and takes on different roles and try to attack you with those roles. The gameplay itself reflects how important the Mimic is as a character and how complex it is as a character. Mixing that with the great theming and setup for the Mimic's abilities to be prevalent, your mind, like you as a player, your mind is almost always focused on the Mimic, like what it's doing in gameplay, or like what it's meant to be doing in the lore, or what it's trying to do in the story of Secret of the Mimic itself. Then, as well, the inclusion of the other threats doesn't diminish the focus on the Mimic, but it expands it for the sake of like gameplay and lore and thematic reasons. Now, all of these being said, I do want to clarify something. 1, I do not think that Security Breach is a bad game, and 2, I do not think Secret of the Mimic is a perfect game. They both have their flaws and their strengths, and I think ultimately they're both pretty solid. But I do think Secret of the Mimic is better, given I could make a whole nother video talking about things that I think should have been done differently in Secret of the Mimic, but that's not the point. With this video, at least, I just really wanted to put a light on how much Secret of the Mimic has, in a lot of ways, improved from Security Breach's foundation. Security Breach, right? It was like a confused game. It was going for multiple things, and it made it hard to follow it, like, as the next entry in a staple franchise for horror games. It wasn't really scary. It was going for a lot of different lines of story, and it made it really hard to follow, and it wasn't very coherent because of that. But with Secret of the Mimic, you can really see how Steel Wool took the flaws of security breach, learned from them, and really improved on them. It's focused on one storyline, and it's built around that specific storyline, and it really builds on that well. It's focused on that gameplay wise. You get a lot of insight into what's going on, even though it can still be confusing because FNaF lore is just confusing at this point. You do know what's going on, and I think that was one of the biggest flaws with security breach, is that it was just super confusing and there were so many things going on that you couldn't follow them. And because Secret of the Mimic is focused, you know exactly what it's going for, and it actually hits that pretty decently. Mentioning Ruin again, right? Like, you could see how some of this focus and change like happened there, where Secret of the Mimic again is kind of like an evolution of that difference into a full game. Another big reason I wanted to make this video is because, you know, I'm actually really excited to see what the next FNaF games have to offer. Because, you know, with like Secret of the Mimic, you know, we can see Steel Wool trying to improve on a lot of the flaws that Security Breach had. And I think if we continue with this sort of trend, that the next FNaF games are really going to stick the landing and stand out as like some of the best in the entire series. And even if there's some stumbling along that path ahead, and even if that path, you know, goes down far ahead and it takes a while to see those next FNaF games, I'm really looking forward to what is next. And I think you should be too. Alright, thank you for watching. You know, like I said, I've been thinking about Secret of the Mimic a lot recently, and I really just wanted to talk about why I think it's a good sign of the rest, like, of upcoming FNaF stuff, because it's just good. It's a solid game, you know, and yeah, I mean, I just talked about it for like 20 minutes, so you already get the point. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you consider liking and subscribing. You know, if you do, you'd get to see more content like this, and I'd be happy because I see funny numbers go up. So it's like a win-win. But anyhow, see you soon in the next video about something I'm not quite sure yet. But that's all for now, so bye-bye.